So this week I learned a thing, and that is Heptabase, which is a visual note-taking system. I've been looking for a few versions of these over the last month or so because I have a specific use case. However, I settled on this one because its features aligned with what I really wanted. And I want to talk you through my first experiences of it, because when you first open it, it's not entirely intuitive. And while there is a great user documentation and Discord group, I found that they actually overshot a little bit and almost didn't show me what I just wanted to know, which was the basics of how do I get started. So when I first opened Heptabase, I was facing a window that was pretty much something like this, which had the journal, the map, the card library, all up in this corner, and probably opened to a page on the map, which brought me to this element here. So what you'll find is that Heptabase is built around the small unit of an individual card, which is, it can be anything from text to video to links and a few other bits which we'll look at. They live on whiteboards, which are spaces that can share cards, and all of that can be tracked in an overall map, which is this thing you're looking at. However, with Heptabase, you'll find some of the tutorials will get started with the journal, which is why it's at the top here, which is kind of like a blank way in. So the journal is date-based, and we'll open that in a sec. Just so if you are new to Heptabase, I'll fire up what this whiteboard looks like. If I click on this whiteboard, you'll see that this is what Heptabase looks like. I can give myself some more screen real estate by clicking on the hide sidebar here. And I can also go Shift 1, which will make the screen as big as it can get for the content that's on it. It's kind of like 100%, although here you can see it's actually sitting at 17% because there's so much content here. However, I've set this little cursor over here, this navigation mode. I've set mine to mouse mode. It can also run in trackpad mode, so that my mouse can, if I use my scroll wheel, is just a zoom, or else I can dial that up with plus minus over here. But it's a really useful thing to use the scroll wheel or left click, and I can pan and move it around. But as you can see, I can keep zooming in. It's an infinite canvas idea, and what you are looking at here is a number of the elements of Heptabase. So each one of these elements here are the cards. So that's a card. These are as well. Although some of them you'll find are then inside other boxes like this. And this is what we call a section, which is a graphical container for a group of cards or even a group of whiteboards. So within this one collection of cards here, which is one whiteboard, you can actually have whiteboards inside whiteboards, which you'll discover is quite useful, because what it does is it lessens the load on the CPU and storage, because it only pulls up the stuff inside that whiteboard as you need it. So I'm going to back out of this a little bit. So this is actually the getting started file, and if you work your way through it, you'll find that it tells you all about Heptabase itself. You can follow your nose through to find out how the cards work, and you can keep burrowing down into these things, how the whiteboards work, and how ultimately how tagging works within this program as well. And there's some useful elements to that. Then there are some tricks you can do with tags as well as searching them. And then there are some kind of specialist things that the whiteboards can do. What you will find is, if again I zoom back out, I'm just going to click that sidebar menu again. Down the bottom here, this is where the help menu is. If you click that, it will actually bring you up to this page here, which is the wiki. I just clicked off that because I'm screen recording and I've got a second screen up, so it would have opened on my other screen. So I opened it earlier, which is why I didn't actually click the question mark in the corner. But this is what you'll see, and there's a really useful set of documentation here on getting started with Heptabase and following your nose through here. And again, it's that basics of card, whiteboard, and tag. But what I found was that it actually didn't tell me what was important, and then started to show some examples of these things, even though it's broken them down into what it calls beginner workflows and advanced tutorials. I actually found that I was facing the overall interface and just trying to take in so much information. It's like, just give me a simple example of this. And there are some tutorials that Alan, the CEO of Heptabase, has put online, and one of them is him pulling apart data information from a PDF, but it's a really complex thing that he's doing, as opposed to here was a really simple thing, so I could kind of extract out what was happening, and I could see he was pulling content that was already living in his Heptabase. So I'm going to try to do an example of me creating something which is a really simple little map of information, so that it goes back to being a more simple introduction to this. As I said, when you first start, you'll be probably faced with just a blank map, or it could be sitting on the journal page like this. Now, the journal is useful if you think like that and you want to capture quick ideas on the day, if it's kind of use it like an inbox. But for me, that wasn't actually what I was looking for, and so I kind of jumped straight over this page, even though you could force it just to work like a blank canvas, because you're not limited to just things that happen on the day. However, it's not a lot different to if I just created a card or a whiteboard in here and started working. The other thing I did within this window, the map window, is I also just created what I called a storage cupboard. And basically what I put in it was things that I didn't need, but I didn't want to leave them cluttering this up. For example, once I'd read the tutorial, I didn't want to get rid of it. So I actually just dragged that down into another whiteboard, which you can just do by literally dragging, and it will go into a whiteboard. And then it meant that I didn't have to kind of look at it every time, but it doesn't delete it. It was just storing it off my main map. And then what I started to do was to build a number of other things on this map. And what I'll do is, for this tutorial, I've actually just stuck them into a little file here called everything, which has got like 10 different whiteboards in it. And I will have a look at that with you. However, on the map, you can actually create anything. So you could actually start by creating a new whiteboard that you're going to start working on. You'll see that it comes up with a date. Again, one of the things that I was trying to do was go, how do I change the name? And I was clicking on it. Once you double click, up here is where you edit that. So you don't have to follow a date rule. So I'm actually going to create a whiteboard for a musical that I'm working on as a lighting designer. And I'm just going to call this Oliver. And so I can just enter that. So I've now created a whiteboard space. So inside of here, I can create lots of individual cards. So an individual card is like, I'm just right clicking and it's giving me the ability to create a card, just to add text, to use a mind map, to create a journal entry, a section, which we saw was one of the containers before, or an actual whiteboard, or go and link to a whiteboard. So I'm going to start by just making the basic element, which is a card. And what you'll see when the card pops up, we've got this thing here, it's defaulting to heading 1, which is actually just a size. For those that know Markdown, it's just a formatting thing. So I'm going to put in here Oliver the Musical, because that's the title of my card. Now you may notice over here there's kind of this little waffle thing going on here just above my mouse. That's useful to know that those are kind of the individual blocks that we can start moving around. When I first started using it, I wasn't sure if things should be on separate lines, but what I discovered is that at the end it just ignores the ones that are, even if you've got several blanks, it's fine. So after I've put my title, I just click enter, and now it's come up with another prompt, which you may be able to see there in grey, which is basically asking me to what do I want to do next. So it's suggesting us to type a /, which will bring up the menu of what is the thing I'm going to put in here. So again, I can actually create something that's already formatted, like heading 1, 2, 3, so different sizes. I can add a whole nother card in here. I can add a whiteboard section, to-do list, bullet lists, numbers, right through to media elements like audio, video, and I can add files, PDFs, and some other formatting right down to using things like latex and maths coding as well. So for now, I'm just going to go back to something simple. So I was trying to create a look at this show, Oliver, and I wanted it to break down into Act 1. If I spell it right, it'll be useful. Act 1. And then I wanted to start writing down the individual scenes because I needed these broken down for me as the designer. So let's go Act 1, Scene 1. And then I was going to actually write down the little chunks that happened because I needed to actually see those and from that extract what are the different locations in this play so I could figure out what the lighting was going to be for all of those. So I can do this manually, or what you may have seen in terms of working with PDFs, if you've seen other videos on YouTube, or if you've seen some of the tutorials already, you'll see you can just drag content. So if I just fire up a text document here, this has already got in it a whole bunch of those titles. So let's go from prologue down to the end of the show. I'm just going to steal that for now. And so actually I'm just going to back that up slightly. So I can just go cut and paste. And you'll see what's happening is each one of those, because they had a line break, actually created its own little block of text here. I can stretch this out to give me a bit more space. I can also, if I click on this, these double arrows to enter, it'll just make this card the only thing I'm working on. Or if I click on this one, edit and split, it makes this card big over here, whatever the thing is I want to bring up, and then I can drag from that. Now, what you'll see before I start actually bringing stuff onto the whiteboard is that even though I've now got these like sitting on here, I can do things like still give them some other formatting. So, for example, I could choose to make this yellow, and because it's a header, I might make this one heading 3, or heading 2, which is slightly bigger than the other text. And I might do the same for intermission, but I might leave that white. And then Act 2, the start of Act 2, I'm going to make, let's do the same, let's make that yellow. I saw this trick in the way that Alan was working with his text, and it just makes it more readable, and particularly as you start to zoom in and zoom out, you'll find that those heading 1, heading 2, heading 3 are quite useful as you get further away from as you get a bigger whiteboard with lots of stuff on it. So what I'm trying to achieve with this one at the moment is I am wanting to extract out these different scenes. You might notice that Act 2, all of the scenes still have the word Act 1 on them, and that's because the play that we did was the Oliver Jr. version, and we wanted to keep the same names as were in the script, and it has an intermission, but it actually doesn't call everything in the second half to Act 2, so hence why what you're seeing there is Act 2, but they've still got Act 1 names. So what I wanted to do then was to start to unpack some of these. So I can go over here and I can just click on this corner thing to close this if I want that to go away at any time, or if I want it to come back, I can fire it up. So if I want to do something like get some more detail in here, it's like, well, I actually know what is it. I know the chunks that are in this scene. So I'm just going to jump back to my text file. Now I could have put all of this into a card and then just dragged it across. When I am working in a slightly different mode as a playwright, sometimes I'll bring in text files that actually have like 1,000 to 2,000 lines of text, and I found that about around 8 of those started to make Heptabase work a little bit hard. So I have started to separate those out onto different files. I could have done it here quite happily, but I wanted to show you firstly how it is to drag from within this environment, and then I'll look at bringing some stuff in from a PDF and from that file sitting in here. So what I'm doing is I'm just going to go into, and I'm just going to add these here are 4 chunks that happen in this one scene. So there's a song, Food Glorious Food, then Mr. Bumble, if you know the play, this character comes in and sings Grace, the children eat, there's the song all about Oliver, and then they have the outro and they all leave this first location. What I want to do though is, rather than this being a thing that's hard to read, I'm going to select this first one and I'm going to make it into a toggle list. So that means that everything under there can toggle. Now, I actually didn't pick up these ones first, but it doesn't matter. I can just go and grab them all, cut, go up here, go paste. And now they have become a part of something which is a bit more useful in my master list. I can just be scrolling down really quickly. The fact that I've got this blank here doesn't matter. I can just delete that to tidy it up if I'm working. You'll notice that over here on the right that this card and this is the same card, so they are behaving the same as each other. However, now if what I want to do is to actually expand this card further and have one that's kind of like a master index, then what I can do is just grab all of this, and you'll see I can grab it by this master kind of waffly thing here, and if I drag that out onto the whiteboard itself, you'll notice that this popped and it turned into a link, and now I've got this here has become a card. If I was like, oh, I didn't mean to do that, something I discovered that wasn't intuitive is that if you're going to do undo, Control Z, that this card and this card have their own undo systems in them. So if I was going, oh, I didn't mean this card for that to happen, I'd have to click on it first and go Control Z, or in fact, I'll go over here because it's the master, and it will release that and put it back here. Now, at the moment, it's also actually left this text out here, but it's no longer, if I change something in this text out on the right, it won't reflect here because it hasn't now linked these two together. So there are advantages to when you've kind of got a master, or there may be times where you think, oh, I just want the actual text sitting out here and I don't want to have this stuff disappear. In this case, I'm actually just going to go delete from the card library. Now, if you delete something worth noting is that to actually remove, like if you had big PDFs or images and sound files and things and you deleted them from your cards, they'll still be sitting in your Heptabase and backing up all the time unless you go up to here, and you'll find that if you click on that, you'll get an empty trash button, and you need to do that to lighten up your file. So I'm going to go back to what I was doing, which is I want to pick up all of this lot, and I've got an option to turn it into a new card, or this idea of if I just drag it out, it automatically does both of those things. It creates a new card and it puts it onto this whiteboard because that's where I've dragged it. And as you can see in both of these windows, it's currently linked. So that's kind of useful. It just means that if I close this again, I can actually work on this card now, and this is that card. If I click on this one, you'll see that it's actually going to locate where this card is now. As the thing gets bigger, this may not be sitting right beside it, but I can, again, I can pop this one up here, or I can get to it from this link. In some of my really big maps, that's quite useful because I might have 100 cards and I just have one big index of everything that I've moved onto it that's now been kind of scrambled out. So it's quite useful. But what I'm looking at doing here is if I kind of follow through this process, I'm actually looking to do something that's quite useful for me. So I wanted firstly to know what are all of the scenes in Oliver. In each of the scenes, where did it happen? So one of the things I'm just going to add to this card, and let me just throw into this line, is location. This happens in the workhouse. Now, at the moment, I don't have a card called workhouse, so I can right-click on that and go turn into a new card. If I just click that, it's gone there. It says, do I want to view it? Yes, please. So what I've done is I've created a card called the workhouse, which I can have a description of the workhouse. So Victorian 1850s workhouse for orphans or destitute workers. And I can add additional content to this. What you'll see at the moment is I viewed that card, but because I didn't drag it out here, it's not here. So it's gone into the card library. So that means that this library at the moment has, this is defaulting to showing me all of the cards that are, those are the ones from the getting started thing, because it's, I can actually search it that way, or it's showing me the cards that are uncategorized. So this one here is uncategorized. So I can add that back to that whiteboard because I didn't do it at the time. Normally I would just do that. So I'm looking for the whiteboard that I called Oliver. So that's now been added. So if I go back to the, if I can go back the way I was, so if I go back to the card library, I can click and you'll see that this is actually the one that I created. So this card has got the workhouse in it. You'll notice that because I kind of did it in a step, it wasn't quite as clean as creating that first one by default as a header. So I've just jumped back in and done that. I'm just going to add some other content into the workhouse that's kind of useful for me. So there are a number of locations in this play, and I know some of them get reused, which as a lighting designer is important for me to know when that happens, and I'll see that as I'm working. So what I've got is the workhouse is, I've got the what description of it, what it's like in terms of a mood: dirty, grim, bleak, prison-like, cold stone, mouldy, heartless, an institution which became known for its terrible conditions, forced child labour, long hours, malnutrition, beatings, and neglect. And then there's a colour palette that I know is going to come out of that for lighting. But I'm just going to add in here, I'm going to add an image because that's going to be quite useful. So I'm going to upload an image of what a workhouse looks like, and here's one I prepared earlier, if I can find it. So this is what a workhouse looks like. Not particularly pleasant places in Victorian times. They were also peopled by officers of the law, for street beggars who were just so poor that they would kind of stay in these places. They also even rented the ability to, they couldn't sleep laying down, they would have to sleep on these rails. So they weren't nice places. Some of you would know the very famous kind of Oliver looking ones where it's just a grimy, dirty place. So this is one of the locations. Now, as I'm building, for me, for this project, I was wanting to build a bunch of cards like this. I don't always want to see all this information until I want it. Up here, you'll find in the corner, I've got the ability to fold this card just to see the title. Because for me, what's going to become important is this scene, where does it happen? I can choose to make a link, so draw a connection. So I've right-clicked, draw connection between this card and this one. So I know that all the stuff in Act 1, Scene 1 happens in this location of the workhouse. And I can create a whole bunch of other cards for other locations that are in Oliver that I know. So there is the Undertaker's house they go to. There is, and I can do the same, just kind of park some of these. They go to Undertaker spelled with 2 S's. Let me just, here we go. They go to London Bridge. So for me, I'm just giving these a title like this, with the same starting thing, makes them come together easier when I'm looking in the card file. What you'll find with the card file is that as the library itself is just full of all the cards that you make, and they go on forever. As I said, you can search them by the whiteboards they're in, and so you're now starting to see some of my other whiteboards kicking around in the background. The ones that you're currently working on, you can just choose that. But the card library itself doesn't have other sorting other than once you have categorized them. But at least the fact that you can see them that way is useful. So you can actually see these starting to build up, and by having these will kind of be easy to spot. Again, using those headers in the cards, even as this starts to fill up, they'll be easier to see. So I'm going to go back to Oliver, and what's building up now is, so I've got the whole outline of the play, I've got a link, I'm actually, which anything I put in this card is effectively what that is seeing. There is another trick for if you don't want to have the link like this, that you can embed the text but again, we can end up with that getting separated. The great thing is on the Discord server, the community that the Heptabase developers are using is really responsive, and I've been super impressed with how quickly they are responding to feature requests, bug reports, or just questions about how do I do this. And it's quite a surreal experience to be using a piece of software and to feel like you've got a direct line to the people putting it together. And I can't imagine that for some of the apps that I use, like Photoshop. I could never get that sort of response from anybody going, hey, I think I'm breaking your product. How do I do this? And these guys are amazing. So I know they're in early days of development, but they seem to be really willing to chase down things that are misbehaving, or if people can't understand stuff, they've got a number of people from within Heptabase and also an active community who seem to be sharing the information willingly, which is cool. So back to this little project. As you can see, I have now started to add layers of cards to this. I've got locations, actually let me just squish this up. If I had a few of these, so I can just grab some of those, I'm just going to stretch them out a little bit. If I had this one so that it was at its full height, if I thought, okay, all of my locations, I want to put them together, I'm just drawing a box around those, and it automatically gives me this option here to create a section. So I'm actually going to create a section on this card to visually organize these things here. And I saw a question on the Discord server, people asking what's the difference between whiteboards and sections. And it seems to be that whiteboards are like folders. They're much more powerful. They can, because a whiteboard can be inside a whiteboard, that they can be referenced in a different way. They have some things they can do that a section can't. But a section is like having dividers in a whiteboard, so it's just a graphical organizer. But you'll see that it becomes useful in that there are a few things that a section can do in terms of, you can just use colors to, they're a limited color palette at the moment, but it may just help you quickly see what's happening on your whiteboard as you are starting to do things. So for me, I might be right, I want all the locations, and as I build this up, I would be looking at what are the color palettes coming out of this that I'm going to use, what are the special effects I have to have, which scenes need follow spot in them, which scenes have specials, which scenes have practical lights, being things like street lamps and those sorts of things. And so I can pick all of that as I'm working, and I've come from a background as a programmer where I can think like a database engineer, but effectively what I'm doing is I'm making a table full of locations. I'm making one full of colors. I can have one full of characters. But something that's quite useful, if I show you another little trick here, which is if I want to bring in the PDF, the script, and just drag stuff straight out of it, then I can do that. So I'm just dragging from another window over here, the libretto for Oliver, and I just literally drag it straight into this whiteboard, which is one of the things that whiteboard can do that a section can't. As I stretch it, what you'll see is I've actually just dragged in here the PDF. If I click on this window, you'll see that down the bottom, if I zoom in, it's actually got its own navigation system. So I can move through the pages of the PDF. The great thing is now I've got this information in here. I'm like, right, I might want this cast of characters. So I can grab all of this, and you'll see that below it, it pops up with this thing of, do I want to highlight? Do I want to make a note? Do I want to add to this whiteboard? So in this case, I'm just going to grab this to show this function. I'm going to add this to the whiteboard. And what it does is it actually makes what it calls a highlight. So you can see this yellow color down the side of here. It connects that note near the PDF I'm just zooming back out, but it doesn't have to stay there. I can move that wherever I want that to be, in the same way that I can go, right, I'm going to stick the overall PDF over by the index. There's some things I want to extract from that, so I'm just going to move back in a bit closer. When it first comes in, it's kind of come in as it was written in the PDF, but it may not have held its formatting. It's just the nature of kind of OCR editing. So I can just literally jump in here, and I can just put in my own line breaks and things I can do if I was like, actually I wanted to group some different things together here, like the villains and the in a different way they have in there. I can cut and paste and move things around because it's just text now. But the good thing is that it still remains. If I click on this, no matter where where I am in the PDF. So if I've been searching around the PDF, I'll just click a few pages, and I go over here on this highlight that's been extracted as a note, and go locate. It'll fire that PDF up actually in this split view, and it jumps straight to that section that I highlighted. So as you can imagine, if you're looking at this for a research task, that's going to be quite useful. But even in this, where I'm using it in a creative way, it's still just going to find the bits that where was this in the PDF. So really kind of a useful function. It's definitely that whole workflow with PDFs is something that's highlighted in the tutorials that the Heptabase guys have put out. So it's worth going through those. And I discovered that it was worth watching and re-watching the YouTube clips that they'd put up. But I wanted to put this one up because it felt like there were just some of these basics missing. So what you may have noticed I was doing there is that when I click on it, I've got the ability to scroll. I can resize this, and the text is just following that. As I said, I can still do things like, even inside here, this text is now still formattable, and it's with its own rules. So I can do things like add colors, italics, size differences, formatting, all those sort of things. It just even to make stuff that I'm pulling out of another document more useful. If I arrive on a map, I said before that Shift 1 will use up whatever real estate. It'll kind of bring that up to 100%, which is really useful. I'm going to just jump to one of my own cards at the moment. So I've got some where I'm working on. I'm a playwright, so I've got somewhere I'm actually extracting information. These that you're looking at here is kind of a map of a whole lot of whiteboards, and there are whiteboards within whiteboards. So I've got a master one, this is a series of about 18 or 20 books worth of writing over the last 10 years, and I decided to digitize what was in there to bring it into here, and then actually do what Heptabase does best, which is let me see the connections between things, and I started that process. As I've been going, what I end up with is much bigger whiteboards like this. If I zoom out, you can kind of see that. Again, the useful thing with the sections is that their titles stay really big, even in a whiteboard where the text is tiny, because I'm zoomed out quite away from this. So there's another advantage of a section, which a whiteboard within a whiteboard doesn't do the same thing, but the sections do. And what you can see there on the left is this here is exactly kind of a good example of I cut and paste from my own handwritten notes. I digitized them using an app online called Pen to Print, which was really amazingly accurate. Ended up with 100 pages of text, a very, very long text file, and then brought that in and just dragged that out onto this whiteboard to sort it. And so then what you're seeing on this whiteboard now is all of my ideas kind of sorted into categories as I've been looking at some things I'm writing about, like climate change, forced migration, and I've got some ideas of how I'm going to use that, and some ideas that have been parked that are not even related to the main ideas of perhaps a year's work. And there might be some other plays or short plays that I'm writing, and so I've kind of captured those. But also, as I tend to work as a playwright, I end up with a whole lot of stuff about writing advice, from advice on plotting to advice on creating conflict, publishing advice, and I just kind of find myself threading that into my writing process. But this has allowed me to pull that back apart, and so from my 20 books I'm going to find all of the different times where I've found a little snippet. It might only be 2 or 3 lines of advice about something, and I've been able to pull that back into I'll be able to see that by searching across all of this. So the search functions in Heptabase are great. You can either search the current whiteboard by using this search button here. And so I could search this. I know that this particular one has, so if I put the word character, it'll come up with all the different places that's been used in this whiteboard. But if you go Control or Command O, it'll search your entire, all of your content across all of your whiteboards and all of your whole map. So if I put in the same thing, how many times have I used the word character? It's going to actually, if I do find, it'll find it in all of the different books. So here, 02, that's the second, that's book number 2, book number 16. I'm already seeing this information, including here's a series of highlights that have been cut out of or highlighted in a PDF. So it becomes this really useful searchable database of work. But I definitely found that the traps for rookies that I found at the beginning, and I'll just go back to my very first, I'm going to go back to my little Oliver. What you're seeing over here on the left is the tabs I've been using pop up. So if I go back to the Oliver one that I was working on, I found that there were a couple of things that I got caught out with. And the biggest ones were realizing that thing about the card and the split view had their own undo systems, and it was, once I found that out, it was awesome. And the little trick about understanding when I was dragging stuff out here and that went blue and why can't I edit that anymore, that actually it wasn't a problem. In this process of going information, make a card, put it into a whiteboard. The great thing is that I could choose to not only use it on this whiteboard, but I'm thinking actually this idea of the characters that are in Oliver Twist, I want those on another whiteboard. I can literally just click on that and go either move to another whiteboard, or I can copy a card so that it's used in another one. An easy place to do that as well is from the card library. So if I go here, I can just go add to whiteboard, and I can add it to as many whiteboards as I like. So if I add this to, I had another whiteboard sitting out there called, what was one that I just had kicking around? One there called Everything. So I'm just going to go back. So the Everything whiteboard is just a spare one I parked earlier. And that's, there you go. This now exists here, and if I zoom in, you'll see that it actually tells me that it appears in 2 whiteboards, and I can see that when I look at the card info, which whiteboards it's used in. And if I remove it from here, I can go remove, and it just takes it out of this whiteboard, and it hasn't deleted it from the card library. It still exists, and it won't have changed it on that first Oliver. It's still sitting there. It hasn't moved it. So I've found that my workflow of actually doing things from the card library is a good way to, when I'm thinking about moving stuff around between whiteboards. So I hope this has kind of been useful for you. If there's an appetite for it, I might do a longer YouTube clip on that process that I'm using as a playwright to actually take my notes and show you that in much deeper detail. But I hope this kind of tells you a couple of useful things that I was just like, I'm not sure what's important here. But the primary one being that you don't have to use the journal space. You can make your own map as useful a starting space as you want. So basically this could be, if you were working on different projects, you could have a work project, you could have, for me, not only do I work as a lighting designer and a playwright, I also work as a teacher. So I could have whiteboards for my schoolwork, I could have some for my theatrical work, and some for my playwriting work. And within those whiteboards, I could have other ones which were the actual individual projects that I'm working on. Or I could have within my schoolwork, I could have it by subject that I'm teaching. And so it becomes really powerful. And at any time, I can start a new thing just by clicking on effectively what is this black void space in the map. Or if it works for your brain, you can do the same thing in the journal, but you'll find that you can then search it by the day you made it. And if that works for you, then good on you. Didn't work for me, so I just wanted to actually start by going, I just want to put it in a place, not linked to a day. and that kind of got me away in racing. So I'm really excited about this product. As I said, I looked at a couple of others, and this one is kicking their butts right now. So I wish you all the best, and if you want to find out more about my kind of specialist use cases, then let me know and I will make another clip.